many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. First thing I kind of want to dive into is kind of get into the economy here. And, you know, we've kind of seen a lot of the overshadowing of this. And, of course, we got the debates and everything. I want to go ahead and get into this Ron Paul. Okay, now we should be set. Sorry about that. We had a rebroad last Friday, so we'll go ahead here. And one thing I did want to start off with the economy. If you go to Drudge Report, it's the top, probably 4 or 5 articles. Right here, Drudge Report. Jobs dry up, record 94,610,000 Americans not in labor force. Participation rate lowest since 1977. Record 56,647,000 women not working. Jobs up only for immigrants, down 262,000 for native-borns. Payrolls disaster. Fed never going to raise rates. It's ugly. Flashback. It's going to be great. Bank stocks tumble. Market at panic levels. So, you know, where is all this going? And we'll go ahead and get into jobs dries up. And this is actually out of AP, and it's under an ailing global economy starts to weigh on U.S. job market. It says here, a sagging global economy has finally caught up with the United States. Nervous employers pulled back on hiring in August and September as China's economy slowed. Global markets sank and foreigners bought fewer U.S. goods. Friday's monthly jobs report from the government suggests that the U.S. economy, which has been outshining others around the world, may be weakening. Lackluster growth overseas has reduced exports of U.S. factory goods and cut into overseas profits of large companies. Canada, the largest U.S. trading partner, is in recession. China, and the second largest economy after the United States, is growing far more slowly. And emerging economies from Brazil to Turkey are straining to grow at all. A result is that economists now expect the Federal Reserve to delay a long-awaited increase in interest rates, possibly until next year. Employers added just 142,000 jobs in September, and the government sharply lowered its estimate of gains in July and August by a combined 59,000. Monthly job growth averaged a mediocre 167,000 in July through September, quarter down from 231,000 in the April-June period. The unemployment rate remained a low 5.1%, mostly because most people can't apply for unemployment anymore, so you don't just file just for you're in the system. You file for a check. But only because many Americans have stopped looking for work and are no longer counted as unemployed. It's not that they stop looking for work, it's that they don't go down to unemployment office and file every time that they put an application in. Because, again, they don't get the check, so why would they? The proportion of adults who either have a job or are looking for one is at a 38-year low. U.S. stock prices have tumbled as fears of global slowdown have intensified. Volatile financial markets can make businesses too anxious to expand and hire. We're back to a period of what I call corporate caution, says Nariman Darvish, chief economist at IHS. It's wait and see if things stabilize. We could see hiring come back. On Friday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell about 200 points soon after the jobs report was issued before recovering to close up 200. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note dipped below 2%, a sign that investors anticipate sluggish growth and low inflation. Over the past year, the dollar has risen about 15% against the overseas currencies, making U.S. goods costlier overseas and imports cheaper. Declining exports have led many analysts to slash their growth estimates for the July-September quarter to a subpar 1.5% annual rate or less. Heavy equipment maker Caterpillar has said it will cut up to 5,000 jobs by year's end. Lower oil prices have hurt its sales of drilling equipment, and overseas sales of its construction machines have fallen. Hershey has said it will shed 300 positions in the U.S. this year after sales in China plunged. A host of other companies have announced layoffs in recent weeks, including Walmart, the world's largest retailer, ConAgra Foods, which makes Chef Boyardee and Slim Jims, and Chesapeake Energy, which has been hurt by lower oil prices. The tepid pace of hiring clouds the picture for the Fed, which is considering whether to raise rates from record lows. Fed Chair Janet Yellen has said that the job market is nearly healed, but she also said that she wants to see further hiring and pay growth for reassurance that inflation is edging toward the Fed's 2% target. Average hourly wages are up just 2.2% in the past year, far below the 3.5% or 4% considered healthy. Many economists now expect no rate hike until 2016, though some still think the Fed will begin raising rates in December, a step that would eventually send consumer and business borrowing rates up. Some analysis, like Michael Kaplan, chief U.S. economist at Barclays Capital, say they remain confident in the economy's resilience. Kaplan notes that the threats from overseas resemble earlier periods in the economic recovery when anxiety about Europe's financial crisis slowed hiring and ruled U.S. markets. He says he thinks underlying drivers of the U.S. economy are healthier now and can power through overseas pressures. Quote, the consumer is in much better shape and the housing sector is in better shape. Gapin said this is something that is more of a soft patch rather than a meaningful recession risk. Now, I kind of have a problem with that. It says the consumer is in much better shape and the housing sector is in better shape. Well, yeah, if you're one of the rich people, yeah, it definitely is. For the blue-collar worker out there, the person that's, slaving week by week, they're the ones that are, not going to do well in this housing market because you've seen, at least I've seen, the only places that the housing market is dropping where someone might be able to afford to maybe go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom because they have kids or something, is inner city. Everything else is going up. We kind of already have somewhat of an understanding on why that is. Driving people that have basically not recovered from the recession out of nicer areas so they can push them in and buy up land for cheap and raise the land value to a point where now no one can get out of the city. And I've seen it happen. And you look at how the economy is, there's one thing about it that none of this is going to talk about, and that is the people that are holding on to jobs, that are able to make a little bit, aren't spending money. And they say that's bad for the economy. Well, it's not bad that Americans save money if we can export. Try to save as much as you can. One thing I've done, don't spend change. Just never spend change. If I can't afford to break a bill to buy something, then I don't buy it. If I can, then I take the change from that and don't spend it. It's pretty easy, I was surprised how much money you can save and how quickly doing that. And also prevents you from buying beyond your capacity. It says here some Americans are still willing to splurge out on pricey goods. Auto sales surged to the highest level in a decade last month, and sales of new homes reached a 7-year high in August. The disparity between overseas weakness and solid consumer spending was evident in the September jobs report. Manufacturers shed jobs for a second straight month, while retailers, restaurants, and hotels all added positions. Central banks in China, Europe could take further steps this year to stimulate growth, and most expect growth in Germany to pick up next year. That could lessen the threat from overseas. And that was the top story on Drudge Report, and you can go check it out there. Now I want to get into a little bit from Ron Paul on this, the latest Ron Paul Liberty Report. He covered this. So let's go ahead and cue this up.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Friday, Dr. Paul.
No, Friday, that's good. I have a special report we got today from our illustrious government, from the Department of Labor, all the statistics on unemployment, and they give us the jobs report for September. And as usual, there's always the predictions. The projections are important because if they're above the projections or below the projections, you know, the instantaneous traders have a lot of adjusting to do. So today, the numbers came out worse than the projections. There were many more people losing their jobs than getting their jobs. And this hit hard on the markets today. The stock market had been up a little bit. It went down rapidly. Gold was up over $20, and they're trying to sort all this out. But, you know, there's something pretty interesting about how these statistics are reported, because it seems like the government, I know you won't believe this, but they tend to fudge the figures a little bit, and they tend to be optimistic, and they tend to manage the markets by just their propaganda. Well, it turns out that the unemployment rate is great, 5.1%. We shouldn't complain about it, but there were 579,000 people who left the job force. So that seems rather strange. Are you shocked that the government would not be straight with us on statistics? I mean, shouldn't we trust our government for what they tell us?
Well, it's funny, I was looking on Twitter this morning, and the White House put out a tweet that looked so impressive. It showed how the unemployment rate has just, since Obama came to office, has just gone downward and downward and downward. So, but they skipped that other part that you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, the labor participation rate, we have a chart on that. We've shown it before, but it does tell us a whole lot. The participation rate is going down all the time, and they keep saying, well, it's the lowest it's been since 1977. But if you sort out the women in the workforce, it's actually the worst it's ever been for men. And why the women factor is important is, you know, in the 70s, a lot of women weren't in the workforce for economic benefits because they didn't need to be. Then they were forced into it, and now they're coming out. So that distorts things. I mean, I think you can see on the curve going down sharply is very, very important. It's done under 62% now, or around 62%. So that is very significant. But it's actually worse than that if you say that if you just look at adult males, the rates are that much worse. But there were a lot of, over 500,000 left the workforce, but the actually employed was only less than 236,000 that was down that way. But it is miraculous. I guess the only thing I can suggest, because we don't trust these figures, but there's others who don't either. I think some of the traders don't trust them either, but what they do is they listen to the noise, and they might agree with us on that, but they're smart enough to say, well, I know how the markets are going to react. But if you really wanted, I think, looking at John Williams, free market stats, shadow stats, he gives the information. Matter of fact, if you look carefully at the Fed even has a number that puts in unemployment rates over 10%. But John Williams says it could be 20%. Well, that sounds like a depression. And people keep saying, well, the economy's doing well. But why are people so pessimistic? I don't think there's any complicated reason to figure out why they're depressed, because what's happening to wages?
Wages are flat, 0.0. But, you know, it's almost like propaganda, because if the government keeps telling us unemployment is way down, the individual who finds himself out of a job, you know, may even be less likely to, you know, he feels bad about feeling bad about it because everyone else seems to be doing so well.
Well, and another number came out today that won't add to any optimism, and that's the U.S. factory orders. And they've been down every month to some degree for 10 months. And they were down more sharply today than they expected. And some blame, you know, our exports have gone down. Well, they say that the dollar's too strong. So they're always about, is the dollar too strong or too weak, and affects it. Of course, they never talk about a stable dollar. Maybe they could trade better internationally if they had stable money and the currencies were related with a stable base such as gold. They wouldn't have all this to do. But the dollar is up. This would affect it, but once again, they have to contend with this. But to think that we're not in a recession, I think is really bizarre. You know, you talk about the real wages down. They haven't gone up. Well, I think they're down because the real wages, if they factor in unemployment, people on fixed incomes, or people who have moved back with their parents and all this, standard of living is going down. And this explains, as far as I'm concerned, why people are so disgusted that they'd even look and say, well, maybe we need a socialist as a president. Maybe we need the iron fist of one person who will direct this economy and run things. And so there is a lot of frustration out there. At the same time, you and I, even though we've tried to get people to wake up and say, well, maybe we could help ourselves back here at home if we didn't waste so much money and effort overseas, but it seems like we haven't yet achieved that.
You know, when something like this happens, the media, of course, turns to what they consider the free marketers, which are the supply-siders. And we were talking about before the show, several of them have come up and said, we've got a great idea, you know, it's a great program to create 1 million jobs instantly. You know, you've first of all, forget about the Fed, ignore the debt, let's lower the corporate tax rate, let's get rid of the EPA, let's deal with the malinvestment that way, and these sorts of things. But they really are missing the main point, aren't they?
You know, and they would also go along with opening up, you know, sales overseas of oil, which is rather bizarre. Why do we have to re-legalize freedom that has been denied us for so long? Well, of course we should. But why was it ever abolished? Why did we ever say you can't sell your oil overseas? It's just mischief and management. So, yeah, their suggestion is like corporate rate at 20% would be great. Sell oil overseas, fine. That's going to help. Less regulations. I don't think people want to talk a whole lot about how much harm Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank has done, and then because that regulates markets and nobody knows exactly what's going on. But the big regulator, of course, is the Fed. The answer to all this is to get rid of the Fed, but that's not going to happen overnight. So is there anything that we could do in the short run that may get us back to a market? Well, the most important thing that we could do to deal with this, go along with the mischief or the elimination or lower taxes and all, that's all very good, but it doesn't deal with the Fed. It doesn't deal with fixing the interest rate. It doesn't deal with the liquidation of debt. It doesn't do with the liquidation of malinvestment. These are all things that are a consequence of price fixing the cost of money. And then there's this overriding issue of moral hazard. Why do people do things in a certain way? Because they might think that they're safe to do it. In other words, why do banks loan out some money? Why was there such a huge amount of debt that we got into trouble in 7 and 8 and the housing bubble and all this? Well, there's a Fed out there, and they have endless credit, and everybody knows, and even those who are very sympathetic to our views about reining in the Fed, we still have to have a lender of last resort because banks can get into trouble. So therefore, we have to always have that. But with the lender of last resort, it always means they're going to make mistakes. I think what we have is the lender of first resort. The Fed's doing all the lending because we don't save money and we don't have a market rate of interest. So that really doesn't solve the problem at all if we don't look, at the Federal Reserve. But we have to liquidate debt, and that is, contrary to everything that's going on, including many conservatives. Are the conservatives going to cut back on the military budget, and are they really going to have an answer? I don't think that's likely to happen soon.
That's what I was going to say earlier, actually, is that there's a huge diversion out there for all these bad numbers, which is we got to get more involved in Syria now that the Russians are there. We got to get more involved in Iraq. We've got to do more overseas. So with a weak economy, what do we want to do? Go spend billions of dollars more in these no-win wars.
And another one is it's all China's fault.
Yeah.
And that's a popular thing to do is just bash China. Of course, they act in their own self-interest, but they're not as in bad shape as some people think. because they're a creditor nation. You know, we're the one that owes all the money, so we'll be under the gun. But China is related because they were sucked into this system too, because we ran up our debts. We could issue the currency. We bought overseas. We have all this wild debt overseas. And foreigners have been foolish enough just to take our paper money and then actually loan it back to us and feed into the system to the point where they're logged in too. They don't want to see the collapse of our system. And right now, our economy is holding up somewhat better than what's happening in the rest of the world. But that will change because exactly who's going to be worse, I think, is going to be irrelevant, because I think we're all going to end up suffering. And that notion is still around, and you've heard it, and we've dealt with it. And that is that war is good for the economy. I mean, we heard that said, you know, with the 30s, you know, Roosevelt got us out of the Depression with a war. So,
get rid of a lot of people from the workforce in that way.
Yeah, that's
permanently.
Yeah. Well, but you know, the unemployment rate goes way down, and that was really the time when the women were put into the workforce. And that one chart we had up there a minute ago, if people look at that chart, what you see is there was an improvement after the 70s. It went up, but the improvement came when we went off the gold standard, which meant that the standard of living was going down. People had a lot of inflation back in the 70s and 80s, and we pushed a lot of people into the workforce. That's probably when the women went into the workforce to make up and keep up with their standard of living. And of course, it looked good, but probably wasn't as good as it appears on the chart. But right now, the chart doesn't look good to anybody, and I think it's the adaptation to bad economic policies. I think it's the adaptation of many conservatives, not all, but most liberals, about debt. Debt is not a big problem, and I think you've heard of a guy by the name of Paul Krugman. he
loves you. I'm talking about you.
Yeah, he said debt is okay. You need more, right? Today, and he sort of badgers me because I won't ever admit that gold and sound money doesn't work. Well, I wonder when he's going to admit that his Federal Reserve and spending and all these things that we've been doing. But I know what his answer would be and has been. And that is, they just haven't done enough. We don't have enough spending to urge things on. Well, it is a contest of ideas, and I think we're seeing the consequence of an economy run by Keynesian economics and paper money and interventionism, a foreign policy that drains our wealth, and that changing the tax code and things may be very beneficial, and changing regulation, it may be good and we should be for it, but it will not solve the problem if you don't deal with the Federal Reserve. We have to get to the point of not allowing the Fed to fix interest rates. They cannot manage the economy. They cannot be a central economic planner. That has to be rejected. We have to reject the notion that debt is good, because that makes a country and individuals totally dependent, and we have a whole culture of dependency. The wealthy and the poor are dependent. And those in the middle class still willing to work, they're struggling and they're hurting and they're losing their jobs. So if anybody really cares about making a fairer society and a better distribution of wealth, they have to look to the free market, because it's the free market that has been able to create the largest middle class in the history of the world and within this country, and the highest standard of living, and it's disappearing. It's crucial on what we decide now. If we decide on more government and more interference and more paper money and more debt, this is going to get much, much worse. We have to accept the fact that a lot of mistakes were made, and that we have to allow the market to give us some indication of how to eliminate the debt and get rid of the malinvestment. That is the solution. We need some liberty. We need some freedom. We need to deal with property rights, and we need a lot less government. Believe me, that won't give us 1 million jobs in 1 month. But a year from now, you would see a thriving economy, and you would see a much happier people. And actually, we'd have a new generation that would be more hopeful about having jobs. But until we change our philosophy of what the role of government ought to be and what the economic policies ought to be, we're not going to get to the bottom of this. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Go check him out. Subscribe. Puts out a lot of great content every day. Now, you know, he brings up the Fed, and that's one big thing. One of the things, though, that was brought up is things like EPA, regulations. And I know there's a lot of people that are crazy about the environment on UCY. So am I. These regulations don't ever stop these big corporations. Even when they get caught, they get fined, slapped on the wrist, and continue to make billions and billions of dollars. What these regulations end up being used for, usually to attack you and your personal property. And when I hear people champion for regulation, it kind of reminds me of a picture that was going around. I don't know if it was true or what. I suppose it was. But it's someone that posted a picture that a sticker was removed from the back of their vehicle. And it was a Bernie Sanders sticker. And the caption read, you know, someone took my Bernie Sanders sticker off. Who thinks it's okay to touch someone's personal property and remove something? Something to that extent. And I'm like, well, usually people that champion fascism, communism, socialism, that they champion it because they want to go after the elite. But you're asking the elite to go after themselves. And of course, they take advantage of that. They write the laws. They make it where it prevents you from moving up in society, or, you know, tries to put that fear into you to not take that chance and go out there and create for yourself, because, well, there's just so much behind it. And that's what they want you to feel. They want you to keep feeding into the cogs of the system that make them rich. You might be able to keep your house sometimes. Now we're seeing a lot of people that went through the recession, depression, whatever you want to call it, of '08. And, you know, it gets to a point where they are the ones that have to downsize while they watch their home or their property that was maybe foreclosed on, and it wasn't something they did. They were working their butt off. They were paying, but also depression hits, recession. They lose their job. They're laid off. Now they can't afford it. People are like, well, they shouldn't have bought a house that they couldn't afford. If no one took out a loan to get a house, you know how many people would be homeless? And that's not what we've had in American history. And we don't understand how we've had this major shift where everything, it seems, you have to take a loan out on. Most people, when they go to the dentist with insurance, have to take a loan out to pay for the rest of it. Most people that have any serious problems have to take a loan out or file bankruptcy. And then people are like, you know, all these people, we should make it illegal for them to file bankruptcy. A lot of these bankruptcies are on loans that they got, or, you know, bills that they have for medical needs. because now they have insurance and they're told now you have insurance, you need to go get all that done. And they find out, well, yeah, the insurance helped, I think, but I still have an outrageous bill that I can't afford to pay. And, you know, I've had a few older gentlemen talk about, you know, I remember, you know, when the doctor would come to the house, and you could pay him. People are like, well, medicine's advanced, and, well, yes, all of society has advanced in some ways, and maybe in other ways not, but we see society as being more advanced. We know technology a lot better, things like that. But now you can't afford to pay for a doctor visit. You can't afford to buy that house. You can't afford to feed your family. And, you know, a lot of this is because of corporatism. This isn't a capitalist society. There is nothing capitalist about it. This is a corporatist. This is where corporation and government work together to put in laws that a lot of times go against your rights and to hold you back to benefit them. And, you know, I wonder, when we look at the jobs reports, even though we do have a lot of people struggling, I believe we also have a lot of people that are kind of working outside the system, too. And I'm kind of afraid that that's where they're going to go after next. Of course, we have Obama calling for tougher gun laws. We'll get into that. But how many people are working for cash, doing side jobs, handyman jobs, cleaning, babysitting, buying things, fixing them up, and reselling them? I bet you the numbers are pretty high. And people are surviving, but they're surviving outside the system because the system has failed them. We have one here from Market Watch. Ugly is the word that sums this jobs report. The instant reaction to the jobs report for September could be summed up in one word: ugly. Everything in this report is weak. Headline: participation, wages, revisions, real ugly. Says here that couldn't have gotten much worse. We basically missed all counts. September headline: August revisions and hourly earnings. Only silver lining is stable unemployment rate. And that was Guy LaBosse from Janet Montgomery Scott. The jobs market struck out in September as far as the Fed's concerned. No rate hike in October, now certainly. And 2015 looks increasingly impossible if the committee was looking for more improvement. This isn't it. Chris Rupke, MUFG Union Bank. And there's more quotes from just all kinds of people on here that are basically saying the same thing, that we shouldn't be looking for anything amazing to happen anytime soon. Then, of course, we had another one out of Market Watch. Markets are back to panic levels, says Credit Susie. If it feels like you're reliving the market jitters of the Great Recession and Eurozone crisis, it's probably because you are. During this week, global risk appetite dropped to panic levels for the first time since January 2012, according to Credit Susie's Global Risk Appetite Index. That was back when investors feared a breakup of the Euro bloc, grappled with unsustainably high sovereign borrowing costs, and freaking out about the spillover from Greece. Before that, the index reached panic level around the onset of the 28 financial crisis after the September 11th, 2001 attacks on the U.S. during the dot-com bubble and after the Black Monday in 1987. Get the picture? This time, Credit Susie's Global Risk Appetite Index slipped into panic territory just as global equity markets were wrapping up their first quarter in 4 years. That came as investors feared a sharp slowdown in China's economy and a collapse in commodity prices. Global growth is not a strong supportive factor for risky assets right now, said the analyst team led by the bank's chief economist, James Sweeney. Weak Chinese growth has had very negative effects on general emerging market performance and commodity prices, and a strong dollar has caused many exporters around the world to seek declining trade revenues. Even if actual activity has not fallen off a cliff, they added. Indeed, the U.S. economy may not even have grown 1% in the third quarter, according to the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now tracker. But here's for the good news. Panic equals buying opportunities. The Credit Susie analyst said panic usually is an overreaction to short-term events, providing a chance to buy risky assets at a cheaper price. I'd say buy gold, silver, while it's down. Because when they put interest, you got to remember, interest rates artificially low, driving market down, driving dollar up. When they decide to put those interest rates on, which a lot of the smaller sectors are already raising their interest rates. So when the Fed does theirs, you could definitely see a spike in that. Things like gold and silver, you're probably going, if you have enough of it, you'll be able to come out on top of that. But the problem is people are like, well, they're going to hold off to 2016. Wait, see, we're expecting the market to just explode again, where we can afford that, where business is just booming, and we're not seeing that. We haven't seen that really in a long time. We never see the correction of that. So every time we go into any type of recession, panic area, we don't see a full recovery. Oh, it'll get better. Well, yeah, it'll get better than the worst point, but it won't get back to normal. But there's a lot of people buying up gold and silver. It gets to a point where there's a lot of these sellers out there that are running extremely low on gold and silver, extremely low. And I've been finding that almost everywhere I've been checking for what I would consider reliable sources for gold and silver. A lot of them are definitely running low on supplies. My main choice is Amagi Metals. They still have some. Again, they're running low. You can always go check Amagi Metals out if you go to antityrannynews.com/metal, and that'll take you straight to Amagi, and that helps cover operating costs. Not really cover it, but help offset some of the price. And you'll see for yourself that they're low, really, really low on supplies, and they used to have pages of different stuff to buy. Now they're down to one page, partial pages on certain items. And when the Fed finally raises interest rate, which they want to hit when they raise it at 2%, 2.5 probably is, I think, what they're going to shoot for, if not 3. Gold and silver, you'll be thankful that you have it around, because you're going to have to offset a lot of inflation. Okay. Let me get to the next topic I want to cover. And this is also part of the economy. And this one was blogs.rollcall.com, debt limit coming sooner than thought, November 5th. Niels Lesniewski. It says updated 5:56 p.m. Sorry, it shrunk on me here. Says the Treasury Department said Thursday would reach the debt limit a bit earlier than was expected by many on Capitol Hill. Treasury Secretary Jacob J. Lew told Congress in a letter that thanks in part to lower than expected quarterly tax receipts, the extraordinary measures to forestall breaching the debt limit combined with new revenues will run their course just a week after the resignation of Speaker John Boehner. Ohio takes effect. It's a little slow here. Says that makes it all more likely the debt limit will need to be addressed before his departure. Based on this new information, we now estimate that Treasury is likely to exhaust its extraordinary measures on or about Thursday, November 5th, Lew wrote in a letter to Boehner. At that point, we could be left to fund the government with only the cash we have on hand, which we currently forecast to be below $30 billion. This amount would be far short of net expenditures on certain days, which can be high as $60 billion. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi was among the first to respond with a call for quick action. Failure to protect the full faith and credit of the United States would have a devastating impact on hard-working families across the country, including tumbling retirement savings and rising interest rates for student loans, mortgages, credit cards, and car payments. Pelosi said in a statement, the Republican Congress must take the prospect of a catastrophic default off the table. The credit rating of the United States is not a hostage to serve Republicans' toxic special interest ideology. Yet time and again, the crisis-addicted Republican majority has threatened to shatter the foundation of our economy to advance their destructive partisan agenda. Basically, what she's saying there is they're willing to destroy the economy to destroy our agenda to manipulate and run the economy. And she's right. If she would say it that way, she's dishonest in the way she says it, because she still hurts hard-working Americans by keeping this monetary policy up and not really addressing any true issues on it, instead of just keep raising the debt limit, keep raising the debt limit, keep raising the debt limit. When do we stop raising the debt limit? When do we start lowering the debt limit? When do we start paying this off? Never, because our system is set to continually put us in debt until it finally breaks. And eventually it's going to break. And the farther in debt we are, the more of a hostage we become to other world powers, which I think eventually, it's going to be part of, oh, they got to save Greece, oh, they got to save America, oh, they got to save Britain, oh, they got to save France, oh, they got to save Germany, oh, they got to save, every country just slowly falls in line to a world order, and the IMF becomes what we consider our Federal Reserve right now. Well, under a world power, it would be the IMF and the World Bank. And I think they want to further that along because they see what's going on with China and Russia. That's also going to hurt our economy, but it also furthers along their agenda. They'll play off of that. That's why, Ron Paul mentioned, they keep saying it's China's fault. Well, that's part of the propaganda, because the Western world is trying to basically prevent Russia and China from creating that world currency. So they want to bring all the Western world together. And, well, you have to collapse the economies to do that. And Greece had a chance to basically get out of the euro, and the people wanted to, but at the end, Greece folded. Okay, I kind of want to get into this gun issue. And again, if you went to Drudge Report, says here, school shooter singled out Christians during rampage, wanted to be welcomed in hell and embraced by devil. More people you kill, more you're in limelight. Immigrant from UK, Army vet shot 7 times trying to save others. Gun-free campus, 1 security guard unarmed. Obama vows to change gun laws, which we'll definitely get to that one. Refers to himself 28 times in 12 minutes speech, and that was Obama. Criminologist, hype and hysteria on rise, not violence. Prez O, wrong about polls. Okay. This one out of USA Today, James Allen Fox, Umpuka shooting, a tragedy. I don't even know how to pronounce it. They said it 100 times, but I still can't pronounce it. A tragedy, not a trend. Another mass shooting sears deep into our collective conscious, but it is hype and hysteria on the rise, not violence. Another mass shooting series, blah, blah, blah. This time, a community college in an otherwise peaceful town in rural Oregon is devastated by a young man taking aim at students trapped in classrooms. 9 are murdered and many others wounded before the gunman is killed in a shootout with the police. Within a few hours, President Obama appeared before the camera, reinforcing the notion that America is under siege. Somehow this has become routine, noted Obama. With obvious emotion, the reporting is routine. Although the sense of urgency may be overstated, Obama is certainly correct about the almost formulaic media response. Oregon shooting had countless news outlets flooding the airwaves and the internet with questionable statistics on the incidence of mass shootings, along with sidebar listings of the deadliest shooting sprees in U.S. history. In the usual rush to offer up some backing or breaking information, news reports were embellished with unconfirmed details about the massacre and the assailant that did little but fuel a contagion of fear. For context, media folks reminded us of the unforgettable high-profile shooting that have taken place over the past few months. Hinting of a problem that has grown out of control, they lumped together rather different types of incidents: the hate-inspired church killing in Charleston, the random shooting at Louisiana movie theater in which 2 victims were slain, and the targeted killing of 2 employees of a Virginia television station by a disgruntled former co-worker seeking payback for perceived mistreatment, as if there is a pattern emerging. Further adding to the state of alarm and confusion, headlines featured scary yet conflicting statistics about various sources. By reducing the standard threshold in defining a mass shooting, 4 more killed by gunfire, not including the perpetrator, the incidents can reach incredible proportions. For example, the Mass Shooting Tracker website redefines a mass shooting as an incident in which at least 4 people, including the assailant, are shot, but not necessarily killed. By this criterion, there have been nearly 300 thus far this year. Notwithstanding the sadness caused by each of these tragedies, nothing has really changed in terms of risk. One can take virtually any period of months or years during the past few decades and find a series of shootings that seemed at the time to signal a new epidemic. The 80s were marked by a flurry of deadly postal shootings, which gave rise to the term going postal. The 90s witnessed a string of mass shootings in middle and high schools carried out by alienated adolescents with access to borrowed guns, prompting the venerable Dan Rather to declare an epidemic of school violence. More recently, the active shooter has become the new boogeyman, armed with a gun. Of course, there were shootings in public places long before this frightening catchphrase was created. Nowadays, anytime someone shows up with a gun in a school, a church, a movie theater, a shopping mall, or a restaurant, Twitter becomes alive with messages of alarm. I certainly don't mean to minimize the suffering of the Oregon victims and the families, but the shooting spree is not a reflection of more deadly times. Consider the facts. According to a careful analysis of data on a mass shootings, using the widely accepted definition of at least 4 killed, the Congressional Research Service found that there are, on average, just over 20 incidences annually. More important, the increase in cases, if there was one at all, is negligible. Indeed, the only genuine increase is in height and hysteria. James Allen Fox is the Lippman Professor of Criminology, Law, and Public policy at Northeastern University. And he's a USA Today contributor. So he's coming out saying that this is hype and hysteria. It's not really, it doesn't have facts behind it. And one thing that was brought up is Obama didn't mention at all what was going on in Ohio. Or not Ohio, but Chicago. Chicago has been just a free-for-all for criminals, while law-abiding citizens don't own and possess firearms to protect themselves against these criminals. And then the law enforcement, therefore, is able to run amok also because they have no fear other than the actual criminals. So it makes it easier for them to go after the non-criminals for minor offenses to pad the pocketbooks of the politicians and the departments. So they become criminals with guns too, basically. That's what anti-gun laws get you. And this one I'm sorry. Right here, gun-free campus, breaking mass shooting at Umpqua College in Oregon, 13 dead, according to this, thegatewaypundit.com. Now it says up to 15 dead, several more injured. So a shooter opened fire at a community college Thursday in Oregon, injured as many as 20 people before he was down, a Douglas County official said. KATU TV reports that Oregon State Police say there were multiple fatalities, but that could not be immediately confirmed. County Commissioner Chris Boyce told KGW-TV that 15 to 20 people were injured in the melee, including one woman shot in the chest. Shooters down not good in Roseburg. OSP says 7 to 10 deceased, another 20 wounded. Shooters down. And it says here, Umpqua College is a gun-free zone. No guns allowed. And let me see if I can read this. Possession, use, or threatening use of firearms, including but not limited to BB guns, air guns, water pistols, and paint guns, ammunition, explosives, dangerous chemicals, or any other object as weapons on college property except as expressly authorized by law or college regulations is prohibited. Possession of knives with a blade longer than 4 inches is prohibited. Banishing weapons is prohibited. Misuse of personal defensive weapons, pepper spray, prohibited. The owner is responsible and accountable for the misuse of these devices. And another thing that came out, and let me see if I can find it here. Hopefully I can. Okay, I got one here from InfoWars. Former security guard at Oregon College lockdown procedures were a death trap. Ex-employee exclusively tells InfoWars that college voted against armed security just last year. A former security guard who worked at the Umpqua Community College, where 9 people were shot dead yesterday, exclusively reveals to InfoWars that the college voted against hiring armed security guards just last year, and that inadequate lockdown procedures ensured the campus was a death trap for potential victims in an active shooter situation. Although wishing to remain anonymous, the individual provided us with his photo ID and a reference which confirmed his employment at the college. The man is also in close contact with people who still work at the college, confirming media reports that the college only had 1 unarmed security guard on duty. The individual reveals that the school board voted just last year against providing armed security on campus. Quote, what they haven't released is that the school board recently made massive cuts to security staff, among other staff, all in an attempt to free up money in the budgets to spend on all the shiny new construction projects occurring on campus the last couple of years, he writes. The school board routinely puts pet projects ahead of providing service to the students. Just last year, the school board voted against providing armed security officers for the campus. He also lifts the lid on how the lockdown procedures for an active shooter on campus, which were practiced just last week, ensured that the college was a death trap for potential victims. Quote, just last week, there was a training for staff on active shooter lockdown procedures, he writes. The college was pleased to note that yesterday the lockdown procedures worked as they should have, but in reality they are a joke. The way the buildings are designed is that it is a death trap to stay locked in a classroom. The majority of classrooms have 1 entrance and exit, which exits into a covered outdoor breezeway. The wall that has the door to be locked down are glass from floor to ceiling. There is no cover, and other than window blinds, no concealment. The individual's criticism of the college lockdown procedure echoes concerns voiced by some that such policies only turn students into sitting ducks and prevent them from leaving the scene as quickly as possible. The individual also notes that the college's $40,000 emergency notification system did not fully work, remarking how no notifications to students and faculty were off campus or on their way to were sent. The security officer also clears up the confusion surrounding whether the campus was a gun-free zone or not. Although the college had a rule that prohibited guns on campus, including water pistols, state law allows concealed carry. The catch is that the school does not encourage it, but they are legally powerless to stop it, writes the security officer. I personally know of 1 student who was interviewed by Breitbart and of 1 employee who had concealed handguns on campus yesterday. As we reported earlier, an Air Force veteran with a concealed carry license was prepared to violate the gun-free zone rule and attempt to apprehend the shooter, but he was stopped from doing so by college staff. And we put the kids in harmful positions, and basically, you know, it's fish in a bucket. And what do we get? We get Obama. Well, we need gun law. Well, he's going to try to push what he can. And I'm just waiting for Boehner to jump on board with that. I really am. I think he will jump right on board. Sure, yeah, we'll get that passed. I won't let the Republican Party stop it. Okay. So, trying to get this article to pull up. Okay. It's finally working here. Have to fix something. Okay, this one, truthofmedia.com, Oregon shooter suspect identified. Obama calls for increased gun control. Following a reported deadly mass shooting on Thursday at Umpqua Community College, I don't know how to pronounce it, Roseburg, Oregon, the suspect has been identified, and President Obama has begun to call for more gun control. The suspect has been identified as 26-year-old Chris Harper Mercer. Police reported that at least 9 were killed, 7 others wounded. Before the suspect was killed, in a shootout with police, 3 pistols and an AR-style rifle were reportedly discovered at the scene. New York Times described Mercer as a recluse and withdrawn young man who lived with his mother, Rosario Espinoza. A former neighbor told the Times that Mercer's mother would often complain that Espinoza's children were playing too loudly and bothering her son. Another neighbor, Julia Winstead, told the Times that at one point Mercer's mother went around the neighborhood with a petition asking the landlord to exterminate cockroaches in her apartment because they bothered her son. She said, "My son is dealing with some mental issues and the roaches are really irritating him." Winstead said. She said they were going to stay in a motel until that time. "I didn't know she had a son." Hours after the shooting, President Obama held a press conference where he said that he believes gun violence is something we should politicize. "We are not the only country on earth that has people with mental illnesses who want to do harm to other people," Obama said. "We are the only country on earth that sees these kinds of mass shootings as shootings every few months. Now, the other countries have daily rape, theft, and no threat of being shot by the law-abiding citizens. Theft, rape, beatings, muggings, all that stuff is extremely high in those countries. You really you hope no one takes your property from you, because criminals will have guns. You know, when Britain still had guns, crime rates were a lot lower. When Britain still had guns, the police carried batons and whistles. When they got rid of every citizen can have a gun type deal, what happened? Citizens didn't have guns. Crime rates went up. Murders with no gun went up. And the police had to get guns. And they still can't do anything about the crime. Why? Because, well, they're always, minutes too late. Now, what's going to come of this, I really don't know. I'm sure the panic's starting to set in where people are running around buying up stuff. Which it's going to happen every time because they keep threatening to do this every time. And there's some information coming out about this kid. I don't know how much of it's true. We know how much flooding of information comes after things like this that get shoved on mainstream, and then they kind of go viral on the internet as well. One of the things is that this kid called for a jihad or of some sort. Let's see if I can find the article I've seen. Few different sources here I'm trying to find or seen that. Well, we know he singled out Christians on the rampage. He's from the UK. Let me go to this one real quick. Says the Oregon College gunman who murdered at least 9 people has been named as Chris Harper Mercer, a 26-year-old who celebrated other mass murderers, attended a school for students with emotional issues, and said, "The more people you kill, the more you're in the limelight." The killer, whose father is British, and said he idolized the IRA, Nazis, on Thursday walked into Umpqua Community College in Roseburg wearing body armor and carrying 3 handguns and a rifle before shooting dead 9 students and wounding 9 more. Witnesses said he had made his victims stand up and say if they were Christian before telling them, "Good, you'll see God in a second," and shooting them in the head. If students answered anything other than Christian, they were shot in the body. After his bloody rampage was reported to police, he was then killed in a gunfight with officers, with one source saying he appears to be an angry young man who was very filled with hate. His British father, Ian Mercer, who lives in California, said, "I'm just as shocked as everybody at what happened. I've just been talking to the police and the FBI. That's all the details I have right now is what you know already." He added, "Obviously, it's been a devastating day, devastating for me, devastating and my family." Neighbors said Harper Mercer was a visible, anxious, and friendless loner who lived with his mother and surfed dating sites looking for love. He was often seen wearing camouflage clothing and may even have joined the U.S. Army. Posts across a host of websites also show how Harper Mercer apparently idolized the violence of Nazi Germany and the Irish Republican Army. He used a reference to a Nazi war medal as his dating profile name and posted glowing reviews of Nazi memorabilia he had bought online. His MySpace page is littered with images glorifying mass IRA fighters, lauding them as undefeated and looking cool, right next to images of him holding a rifle. Harper Mercer wrote in a post this August about how much he admired Buster Flanagan, the Roanoke shooter who killed a cameraman and newscaster at the television station where he had been employed after getting fired. On that same profile, it also showed that just 3 days ago, Harper Mercer uploaded This World Surviving Sandy Hook BBC documentary 2015 for people to watch on the file sharing site. The tragic victims of Oregon's mass shooting were identified on Friday as relatives, friends, and coworkers tried to come to terms with their tragic loss. 19-year-old student Lucero Alcaraz was the first to be identified by relatives. His older sister, Maria Leticia, posted a heartbreaking tribute on Facebook saying the first-year UCC student had aspired to be a pediatric nurse. And it goes on for a little while, but, you know, we see things like this, but we also see constant shooting going on in Chicago. Not talked about by the president. That's his own, you know, city right there. Chicago fails to recognize the violence in Chicago, despite the gun-free laws, because of course criminals don't give a flying crap about laws to limit guns. They go, good, no one else has got one that's abiding by the law. So you see the typical, you know, family that's trying to do everything the right way. Well, very easy target. They're going to come at me with a baseball bat. You know, our government's pretty hypocritical in the first place. Ben Swan put out another reality check, and this kind of shows the hypocrisy. And this one is reality check. The U.S. turns blind eye to Afghan allies abusing children, and a lot of people have seen this come out of lately, and it really is sickening that this is what we're doing to countries, and we wonder why people might hate us. Not because we have freedom, it's because they don't. So let me cue this up here.
Is literally jaw-dropping. Soldiers who served in Afghanistan stripped of their command for standing up against Afghan men who were sexually abusing young boys. Why? Because the abusers, our government said, were the good guys. And if those are the good guys, then who are the bad ones? This is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. It is a blockbuster story released by the New York Times. The accusation here that American soldiers and Marines have been instructed to not intervene, in some cases, not even when their Afghan allies abuse young boys and children on U.S. military bases. One of the focuses of this article, that the Army stripped Special Forces Captain Dan Quinn, who had since quit the military, of his command after a 2011 incident in which he allegedly assaulted an Afghan police commander who had admitted to keeping a local boy chained to his bed as a sex slave. Now, since the release of the Times article, there have been dozens of stories coming to light of so-called dancing boys who were coveted by Afghan commanders, and pretty boys abused and held because they're considered a prize. To be clear, reports from the military insist that this is just a part of Afghan culture. Because access to women is rare, many men, they say, turn to each other. But the abuse of children is very different. Colonel Quinn, who was a Green Beret, said to the Times, quote, "The reason we were here is because we heard the terrible things the Taliban were doing to people, how they were taking away human rights. But we were putting people into power who would do things that were worse than the Taliban did. And that was something village elders voiced to me." End quote. And remember, that was the reason the American people were told that we were in and stayed in Afghanistan for so long, even when we knew that Osama bin Laden was not there.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
The agreement we signed today sends a clear message to the Afghan people. As you stand up, you will not stand alone. It supports Afghan efforts to advance development and dignity for their people.
But in taking down the Taliban, who have reemerged, by the way, did the U.S. make things better? Not according to Quinn, who says this: the American policy of treating child sexual abuse as a cultural issue has often alienated the villages whose children are being preyed upon. Look, the U.S. commander over Afghanistan has stated there is no official policy to not report child sex abuse. And yet dozens of soldiers have already responded to that claim, stating that that's true. Nothing stops you from reporting it. It's just that commanders look the other way when you do and say it's none of our business. Look, at the end of the day, $685 billion U.S. dollars were spent on Afghanistan. Trillions more will cover the cost of care for veterans. More than 20,000 U.S. soldiers came back wounded. More than 2,300 didn't come home at all. Today, the Taliban is on the rise, and even if they weren't, can anyone even tell the difference between the Taliban and the U.S.-backed commanders who replaced them? As Vice News asks, is this what winning looks like? That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that tonight on Twitter.
Okay. So we put in a even worse regime that's doing even more atrocities to the civilization, and we wonder why they hate America. They hate America because of our freedom. We should bomb them. No. I think that's exactly why they hate America, is because we keep screwing their, lives up. They can't have a normal life while we're up here. Just go to the grocery store, get some food, do barbecue tonight. Yeah, and they hate us because, no, they hate us because we don't allow them to have the same thing. We constantly bomb. Oh, you got that dictator in Libya, Gaddafi, he's a bad guy. What does NATO end up doing? They go in and bomb the pipeline that's feeding all the farms in the, country to provide food for the country. What's going on there? I thought we were going after Gaddafi, not taking out the food source for a country. Well, don't worry, we got Monsanto already loaded up, ready to send some. If you don't understand our foreign policy, you're not going to understand why they have so much resentment towards America. And you got U.S. talking a lot of crap right now about Russia over in Syria. Well, we haven't learned from Afghanistan. Got a worse regime there. We haven't learned from Libya, Iraq, both overtaken by ISIS. We go over to Syria. Well, we're going to go after ISIS in Syria. Why not wipe them out before they're getting into Syria? We're going to go for ISIS in Syria. Looks like you're going after Assad in Syria. Well, he's bad too. But ISIS is growing in Syria. Oh, we're trying to take care of that. Yeah. They parade mile-long convoys into towns. Why are you not bombing the convoys of all these American vehicles? we're going after ISIS, and Russia comes in, says, stop overthrowing the dictators. At least the dictators would being left alone can keep a country more civilized than what you're doing by causing even worse people to come into power in these territories. You have ISIS. You have a worse regime in Afghanistan. You have Afghani villagers telling U.S. commanders that they would like to see the Taliban back because at least they don't take our kids and rape them. Like, they're taking all of our boys and like chaining them in beds and raping them. But, you know, it's getting out of control. Now you see Russia just kind of peed off, seeing what's going on, seeing this. I think Russia feels like it's been getting cornered, except they've been kind of playing their own cards through this whole thing, and now they've seen their opportunity. And I think that'll also be playing into the whole economic crisis right now. People are seeing the U.S. economy not doing a damn thing. It's not a fighting power. And, you know, Ron Paul pointed out about, you know, China might not be doing good, but they don't hold debt. They have given the credit out to people like, hey, United States, maybe. They've also been hoarding gold and silver. So has Russia. The world's starting to see Russia and China in a role that they've been fabricating to put out there of a new alliance and world power. And I think the ideology that a lot of the elite that have been trying to run things, a lot of the elite that have been trying to manipulate things and control things all the way, you know, to Obama and his ideology, what he thinks possible, don't know exactly what they're in store for. Because to create their world power, they want to collapse society. But they forget about one thing. You start collapsing a society, you yourself become the enemy. Therefore, it's a little bit hard to convince them that they should continue to follow you. And I think when you've seen what happened at the end of Bush's term, what you see happening throughout Obama's term, shows more and more people are waking up to these people are not helping us. These people have no interest in our well-being at all. What that also does is it shows a collapsing empire, and it brings rise to the more radical people in society like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. I really think you see a kind of fight between socialism and fascism type situation going on there. Talking about both of them, I'll get to something here in a minute. But I did want to play something from Rand Paul. If I can find it here. I know where I can go. Okay, here we are. Load. This one was over Common Core.
Constitutional freedoms would you remove from the Bill of Rights? That absurd question is from an assignment given to sixth graders in Bryant, Arkansas, as part of the Common Core initiative pushed by President Obama and other big government politicians. This so-called history lesson posed the scenario that the Bill of Rights has been deemed outdated, and the only way these children can fix the country is by restricting our liberties. We all agree that America's public school education system is in dire need of reform, but I'm afraid Common Core has very little to do with solving the problem. Some students' math questions don't focus on addition or subtraction. Rather, they revolve around whether or not students believe that the 2000 presidential election was fair. Other questions encourage students to read sources that attack President Reagan's economic plan, blaming his tax cuts for our economic woes. In fact, according to Common Core, the Cold War was won only when President Reagan finally decided to give up on his fierce anti-communism and accept Mikhail Gorbachev's friendship. Absurd? Think again. It's part of Common Core. Instead, Common Core is a hodgepodge of educational theories, bureaucratic groupthink, massive data collection, and pure secular statist propaganda. Worse yet, Common Core is being pushed by big government politicians on both sides of the aisle, including two high-profile members of my own party that may have eyes on the White House. As a parent who has always taken education seriously, I can only imagine my response if one of my sons ever came home with an assignment like one of these from their school. That's why I hope you agree with me. It's time to put an end to Common Core now, before it's too late. Under the Constitution's 10th Amendment, education should fall under the jurisdiction of states and localities. But the big government politicians have chipped away at this local control for years, finally culminating in the creation of the Department of Education in 1979. And conservatives, led by presidential candidate Ronald Reagan, fought the encroaching federal takeover every step of the way, fearing exactly the kind of madness that we see today. Since its founding, the U.S. Department of Education, their budget has soared by 500%, yet we receive virtually nothing in return, as big government education, big government ideas, and all of this centralization has become far more interested in social indoctrination than teaching kids the 3 R's. Just imagine the next generation of Americans after years of Common Core's progressive indoctrination in the classroom. Just imagine how government bureaucrats will choose to wield the massive amounts of data they collect on American school children and their families. So that's why I'm leading the fight in the Senate to restore control over education to parents, teachers, and local school boards. Please join me in my effort to stop Common Core now by signing your petition right away. With your help, my hope is to create a massive groundswell against Common Core that can sweep the country. Thanks for your time, and I hope you'll be part of that fight.
Now, we know the kind of BS that Common Core is. It does nothing to help the youth out. If anything, it dumbs them down, definitely in a worldview. But, you know, I really think that people like Bill Gates would like to see the populace come down. They want to be the smartest people. They don't want the entrepreneurs. That's why you see a lot of these companies try to hire and guide the youth into their field. Because really, a lot of this youth probably could produce and come up with the idea that would outshine Microsoft or Apple. And a lot of the ones that do have that potential have to operate more in an open source environment to keep from basically coming under the target of those big corporations. But they eventually still tend to come under. But Common Core is not going to let kids shine and get to their best potential, and it really hurts their, potential when it comes to schooling and all that. And I have my own opinions on public school and even college, and I just, there's so much invested in they must go to college that, and even at the employer level, that we have a lot of kids that go to college, get these degrees, they skate through it because really they're not learning. Now, this doesn't apply to every field. This doesn't apply to, everything, but they're, business degrees. You know how many people I know that have business degrees that can't, think for themselves. These I don't know how these people get business degrees. Well, because they're handed out, basically. You have all these small little colleges everywhere, online courses everywhere, that everybody has some type of degree, but it doesn't anymore measure the intelligence of people. And it's great when you can go get a degree and you're actually learning things and you're actually furthering yourself. But so much of it is BS anymore that it's not a measurement. And I think slowly there's some employers that are going, hey, I got this guy here that he's a lot smarter than a lot of people I have here. And I know a lot of the people I have here are either, going through college or might have a business degree or something. And they're starting to see that a lot more because people that never really paid attention in school, never learned a lot, were able to skate by, cheat, and, it was just all fun and games for them to get good grades because they could just copy or, pay someone to do it. Those people were able to go to college basically do the same thing. I remember when Facebook wasn't known quite yet for being something that all your information is getting shown and people are finding out about everything on, don't share on Facebook. Before all that happened, when Facebook was kind of newer and becoming the thing over MySpace, and I would see it all the time. People sharing, answers and all that through Facebook. And colleges started checking people's Facebook, and then it just became a data source. That's what Facebook basically is data collection. Share too much and they have it. Oh, you shared test results and your school found out about it. Okay, give me a second here. Keep on cover this one if I can find it again. Okay, this one from truthandmedia.com. This was a petition put up. As petition signatures rise, Rand Paul agrees to Truth and Media Town Hall. And this was by Joshua Cook out of Truth and Media. In the first week since its launch, the petition to gather support for a town hall featuring Senators Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul has exploded. In addition to the thousands of signatures collected, Senator Paul confirmed with Truth and Media that he would in fact participate in a town hall with Senator Bernie Sanders. Anytime, anywhere, Paul told Truth and Media's Joshua Cook. After much back and forth between the Sanders campaign and Truth and Media, Senator Sanders' camp has no comment at this time. Neither the Republican National Committee nor the Democrat National Committee has confirmed with Truth and Media that candidates can or cannot participate in a town hall event outside of their scheduled debate events. Both candidates have focused their campaigns on discussing issues that the mainstream ignores, while the swath of candidates participating in scheduled debates are wasting time on stale issues. Senators Paul and Sanders are talking about marijuana legalization, health care and tax code, civil liberties, and other pertinent issues. An increasing number of Americans, including millennials, are hungry for real vetting of these issues, and we at Truth and Media believe that will happen at a Paul Sanders town hall. Now is the time to make noise. The more we push, the better chance we have making this happen. Paul is already on board, ready to take on Sanders in a Lincoln Douglas style town hall. This event has the making of being the most historic discussion between presidential candidates in generations. And they have the petition you can sign there at Truth and Media. And I think, now, I look at the Republicans extremists as being Donald Trump and the Democrats being Bernie Sanders. But they're extremists on the same scale. They are totalitarians. They are towards, the control of everything. I see, Bernie as being a socialist, nationalist, and Donald Trump as being the fascist, nationalist. And, of course, socialism always leads to the fascism or communism, because you have to do that to make your dream of socialism work. Otherwise, it's libertarianism if you voluntarily buy into it or not. That becomes more of a free market rather than government making you hand up your cash and then splitting it evenly, which if you're a socialist, that's what you call for, which means you have to basically become a communist, a dictator type society, or fascist. And I think that's more what Donald Trump is he wants to be that fascist type nationalist. He probably doesn't even realize it, but that's what his rhetoric seems to point to. But Rand Paul is more on the scale of he's left of that totalitarian / freedom line. So he's more towards the freedom, but he definitely has his flaws, and I've pointed them out many times. And I don't put trust in Rand Paul, but I think if you're looking at all the candidates, he's the only one that's actually bringing up a lot of issues that are, I believe, places that we can actually make improvements towards freedom. And I think Bernie Sanders kind of has a little bit different take, more of a opportunity for government to take money from you and distribute it more evenly. Well, you know what? If the hard worker gets paid as much as the one that sits on the butt and never has to do a thing, who's going to go to the factory and work in a hot environment when they could just be a cashier somewhere. Of course, then you have the class of the people that they get their positions only because of who they are. At least we have some sense that you can work your way up in our society. Not as easy as it should be because we don't have a true, free society. We have regulations that prevent it and all that, but you can somewhat still move up, and that's what I think a lot of people are starting to realize. You just have to go out there and just, find what you love and just do it. Screw it. Just do it. The main thing they want you to feel is that you have to work 9 to 5, therefore you have to send your kids to a public school because you don't make enough to pay for a private school, and so your kids are off there learning BS and you're working your butt off and not getting ahead. They want you to fear to have to leave that job that's not getting you ahead in life for fear that you'll lose what you have. Well, if you don't leave that job, you can guarantee yourself a job that doesn't allow you to advance when you have the ability to do it and you show the ability. By you staying there, you're ensuring that you're not going to get ahead in life. If you want to work at McDonald's and you know that, well, you're probably not going to get a manager position. Maybe you don't want to be a manager of a McDonald's. You're just working at McDonald's to pay your check. You don't want the extra stress. They don't pay you enough for that part. You have to work too many hours on a salary, so you're not getting overtime, and blah, 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 blah. And you are afraid to leave that job because, well, I got to raise my family. There's a point that I've been seeing lately in a lot of people that they're going, you know what, if I don't do something now, they're not going to have much of a future. And people are really just like grabbing the bull by its horns and going, this is what I love to do, I'm good at it, and damn it, I'm doing it. Videographers, photographers, so many people just really showing a potential that we all have. We just really have to find it. We have to really grab it by the horns and, ride out the tough times and try to prosper during the good. And with our economy, our exports, and everything that they've been manipulating, and where we sit, and the confidence we have around the world. We have Russia able to just kind of push us out of Syria. Listen, we're coming in here, we're cleaning up this mess. And U.S. is like, you shouldn't do that. Stop. Damn it, man. Well, if we're going to prosper in the future, we're basically going to have to go back towards mom and pop. We're going to have to go back towards things that for a while have seemed to be extinct. You're probably still going to have your superstores that will, have to try to fight over. But I don't know if you notice anything about a lot of these superstores is their selection has gotten pretty damn small. You can't go to any of these big box stores and find the hardware and stuff you need. Some of the smaller ones, like, little hardware stores that they're usually private owned but use a corporate type name. It's a franchise. And they do carry what you need, but I think we're going to see more of either the franchise side of it or just mom and pops. And what it's also going to do is create competition in the market. I think if we see regulations lift enough that we can really see a big explosion of mom and pops, all the taxation, all the permits, all the license, all this BS, I think we could see our economy get better. But we're not going to get better by holding on to these dinosaur corporations that have been milking the tit of government. The banks are not too big to fail. GM, Chrysler, Ford. I love GM. Old school Chevys and GM vehicles. I've always had a soft spot for, the older GMs. And I still don't think that they're too big to fail. If they're not doing it right, that's what happens. I don't want to see them fail, but I want to see them only survive on their own merit. And I think there's, twofold when it comes to making sure people are paid a decent wage. When you get to a point where you start going beyond that, when you got someone putting two connectors together on an assembly line, just assembling two connectors, sending it down, they weld or solder connectors together, and then the next person heat shrinks the heat shrink over it or something like that. 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour, of course, depending on where you live. Live in California, your wages be higher. You live in Indiana, your wages are going to be lower because of the cost of living. But to get paid extravagant amounts an hour for a pretty simple job, I think is a little outrageous. So I think unions kind of went overboard, where people could do a real simple job and get paid wages of someone that would be doing a hard job at any other type of factory that wasn't automotive related. And when they went overboard, I think that's what started the decline of the bigger companies. And now we have unions usually fighting to not lose benefits or not lose vacation, not lose their short work hours, instead of fighting for more because, well, these companies are drying up more and more. But again, I think when we start seeing the ability for more people to actually get out there and create and do what we're meant to do, then we'll see a better society. We are in a state where we're held back to a point that we're more interested in what other people are doing, what we could be doing. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv.